yesterday and are ready for starting today. We have a second part of our session from yesterday, values, work and industry. We have three contributions, which you will see that there are some connections between them. And I'm very happy to have this discussion today with you all and with colleagues. The first speaker is Bettina Krings. She will present her work Beyond Technological Futures Towards Integral Models of Work and Life. Bettina.
Yeah, thank you, Masjid. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation to have the opportunity to speak about some thoughts in my thematic field. Since nearly 15 years, I'm working in the field of technology and work. And I think yesterday we had really very, very intensive discussions about the enabling character of technology with regard to societal development, also with regard to the reconfiguration of social, ecological, political, economic aspects. And today I would like to speak about the reconfiguration of work, labor markets, with regard to technology as an enabler. Theoretically, since many years, I'm very much criticizing the idea that technology and speaking about technology, the discourses of technology should strengthen very much our visions and ideas on societal developments, on the developments of work. And today I would like to give you some ideas, or I would like to share some ideas, because I think that the discourse on artificial intelligence in the field of work offers and provides some interesting aspects to widen the discourse on the enabling character of work. And this was the idea, whether I saw the beyond technological futures towards integral models of work and life. You all know this, in the last year there was a discussion on Industry 4.0, and there was a strong discourse about the industrial revolutions 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. And there was a narrative about the strong notion of technology which put forward the development of work and labor. And because of this, I would start with a hypothesis. I will read it. Since industrialization, history of work has been narrated by the progress of technology and its economic-based logic. However, the debate on technological change in general is actually strongly interwoven by societal momentum of crises like pandemic crisis, climate change, aging society, and its manifold challenges. The debate on future visions of work should go beyond technological futures. Therefore, we need new horizons and questions which are guiding and debating societal values with regard to these future visions. And coming from this perspective, I would like to offer you some trends of digital economies and digital work. I would like to give you a small insight to the topic of artificial intelligence and work and new issues, and towards new visions and expectations of industrial societies. And at the end, I would like to discuss a little bit the topic, how we may extend the discourse and the field of technologies as enabling factor. It's very clear our society and our work, labor market structure of work, is in a huge transformation, process since, I would say, 30 years. It's visible, but there are authors which already started in the 1960s, 1970s with information-based society, knowledge-based society. So already there was a discourse on the transformative character of work. I would say since 20 years it's more or less visible also, and there's empirical relevance that there is really, that we are in a huge transformation process. And this huge transformation process already is debated since decades. Very, very intensive since the 1990, where there was a debate on the digital economy and also, of course, the consequence, the impact on work. So there's a quotation from 2015, which I think is already very, very interesting, very important for us. The digital economy has 4 specific features: the irrelevance of geographical location, the key role played by platforms, the importance of network effects, and the use of big data. So you have here specific facets which are already describing the transformative character of work and of labor markets. And if we go a little bit more in detail, so I would give you some hints only about these debates. That means that digital data became the central strategic resource for, in parentheses, knowledge-based economies, and this is very interesting, its dissemination processes. We had a large discussion about the added value about digitalization of work. So what is really the added value? And there was, it was questioning, so where is really creating this added value? It's a relationship between the material and the visual sector. So there was a strong discussion, and I would say Sabine Pfeiffer, she wrote a book based on Karl Marx, and she really, really discovered for me I would say the strong aspect of added value of digitization of work, and she described it as its dissemination processes, which really created a new level which does not relate to material and virtual work, but is really a new level of added value. It was very interesting. Then, of course, the network became the most important principle of the organization of these economies and of societies. You know the very famous book of Manuel Castells, many books, Network Society, where he already described the principle of network as a new organizational principle, and this implied the blurring boundaries between production sector, administration, marketing, consumption, and of course also the blurring boundaries of daily life activity. And it was interesting until today, so it's not clear. And if you speak about the enabling character of technology, so we can, what is really enabling? Is it the cooperative principle? Because there the idea of we need no more competition. So this networking idea is creating something which can be really very interesting for our work, for our working organization, but also for our daily life and for our societal development. Premises for cooperation principle, question mark. Of course, another point is the digital economy has developed new business model which have strongly, but really strongly reorganized global value change. Keyword is globalization, so it has created new organization patterns on a national, but also on an internal, on a organizational scale. We are speaking about flexible, agile organization patterns. There are a lot of studies who show that there are speeding up processes which were very much visible also in the production sector and also in the administration marketing sector, We have new competitive dynamics, if you think on the big five, but also the concentration of capital is very visible and has created a lot of societal problems. And of course, there has been created this by the winner-takes-all model, which has, as I said before, created a high concentration of capital, which also became a visible aspect of globalization. And of course, digital platforms as an organization and working tool. So coming a little bit to this network idea, so we have created, or digital platforms have created, more effective coordination between individuals, collective and organizational working relations. And these have been debated also very, very intensive. And there are new forms of control, and you can, according to your perspective, there are positive but also negative aspects. So, and to make it very short, in all these topics with regard to work, there are a body of literature with regard to the political strategies accompanying this transformation of work. We have a strong trend in the last decades of deregulation of work. We have a strong tendency of flexibilization of working processes. We have also a strong tendency to a intensification of work, not only in the qualified and high qualified level, but also in the workers level or in the less qualified level. We have a precarization of working conditions, which was called the working poor model, first in the Anglo-Saxon countries, but also we have taken it into account also in the German labor markets. There have been created new role of employment models with a strong focus on the so-called self-employability, which theoretically was also discussed very intensively by Voss and Fonkras and has created a strong debate on this. Of course, a strong debate also was automation and the loss of jobs. You know it all. And the new skills and qualification, which also in the topic of artificial intelligence became very prominent, specific in the European countries. We are discussing this very strong. And we have new labor markets. If you go to the theoretical approach of Schumpeter, he said it's everything fine. It's a type of creative destruction. The old labor markets say they have gone, and there is a creation of new labor markets, which is also debated very intensive. Okay, to give you this is very, I would say, familiar to you, this type of work, based on digital technology, collaborative, in a young spirit. So there are trends of new forms of labor, but behind there are also huge debates of different topics and different levels. So coming to this topic of artificial intelligence in line with Industry 4.5, later we will learn about Industry 5.0, and coming to artificial intelligence, which is debated since, I would say, 5 years, very strong, connected also to work. Because it's interesting, artificial intelligence and ethics was very, I would say, since nearly century. There is a lot of theoretical background, there's a lot of conceptual approach with regard to human-machine interfaces, but the relationship of artificial intelligence, ethics and work, I would say this is relatively new. And we are actually, in some projects, we are figuring out how we can deal with this topic. So, learning from the human-machine interactions, so there are a lot of high-level expert groups on artificial intelligence. We have heard it yesterday, which deal with the topic of artificial intelligence and ethics, and what we have to take into account. And I have not the opportunity to go more into details because I think we have it discussed yesterday very intensively in several opportunities. So there is the idea that priority should have the human action and human control in all these developments. Yesterday we have it heard also in the keynote. There should be a technical robustness and security issues. Privacy and quality of data is nearly classical in this field. Transparency and expressibility of data as well. Diversity, non-discrimination and fairness with regard to the bias of data also has been discussed very intensive. The accountability is from the ethical side, I would say the approach which has been discussed and is been discussed intensively. And in the studies we have considered in the last week, so the societal and ecological welfare became also very, very prominent. So there is a huge number of checklists, guidelines, ethic impact groups, which deals with this topic of artificial intelligence and ethics, with sometimes also with regard to work. But if we sum up, though, these discussions are tough, mostly dominated by either general ethical issues such as human versus machine autonomy, matters of trust, fairness, accountability and transparency, or technical solutions to avoid algorithmic discrimination. So there is a socio-technical environment of artificial intelligence which seems very ambitious to open really the space and the discourses with regard to ethical, social, ecological, sustainable visions. But what does it mean for work? So in some projects we are working, so we have studied also these approaches with ethic and artificial intelligence, and there are some guidelines which we found very interesting and which we thought this could be transformed or also configured, this field of ethics and artificial intelligence and work. And I would like to only very, very short to give you an insight about a guideline from Niederrümling and others. He is a philosopher and he is working on this topic since very, very long time. And he deliberated a model where he said it's very important to go into the process and analyzing the relationship of artificial intelligence and the context. So number one, we need descriptive analysis of the system, the description of the whole socio-technical cultural context. So what does we really need? How do these technical options really respond to our question? This would be very, very important at the very beginning, and not to create some visions which does not having nothing to do with the opportunity and the options of technology. We need second, we need a descriptive analysis of values. Which values are on stake and should be taken into account when we are doing this descriptive analysis of the system. Which values are declared as desirable? We have to think about what are on stake and which we maybe like to transform, or where we think this would be important to discuss them maybe intensively. Then of course we need a technical analysis on the practical level, what is possible from the technical side, the socio-cultural attitudes of technology, its limitations, but also its visions, and we have to figure out also the technical bias on this technical analysis. Fourth, we have to take into account the possible conflicts of values and objectives, which may be there and which have to be figured out. So which values do the different stakeholders represent, and how do these values are creating a trade-off in between maybe? Or we have heard this case from India yesterday where are really conflicts, and there we have discussed also how to respond to these conflicts. And this is very interesting, I think, with regard to transformation processes. We have to think about mediation processes, moderation processes, but also to resolve conflicts. And fifth, the evaluation of ethical system. Which type of values should be taken into account? Is it deontology? Is it virtue ethics? Is it professional ethics? So we have to speak about these topics, not only to say, oh, we need ethics approaches, but we have to be much more concrete. And sometimes it hurts. It hurts. We are really, we have to confront ourselves also with this question and with the consequences and with the impact of these questions on several levels. And of course, at the end, we have to design the technical visibility of the whole context. So which technical options are possible? How these options may be made visible or embedded into the whole context. That means you see there is a huge process before we are really speaking about the options of technology. Of course, this is complicated and seems complicated, but we have in one project, we have a colleague from the unions, and he is already figuring out also these processes within organizations, and recently he wrote up that they are going forward. Yeah, it's complicated, it's time consuming, but it's important to do it. So last point, future of work beyond digital futures. So what does it mean for work? Future of work beyond digital futures, to widen this with these approaches we do have in the field of artificial intelligence and ethics and work. So we think that the implementation of artificial intelligence with regard to sustainable production working processes should be important, should be part of a local national strategy of transformation, which we are in between with regard to, so we should really discuss intensively the aspects of welfare and care versus increasing economic efficiency. So the participatory design in creating artificial intelligence-based working environments together with the affected workers and employees also refers very much to the ideal of transformation processes. It seems very important that negotiation processes and collaborative participation is part of the development of working environments and also the creation of the technological embeddedness of working environments. So work and democracy, self-efficacy and intrinsic motivation versus dependency and precariousness or unemployment. The creation of working environments and working contents should be inspiring, motivating, and should be offering different learning processes and further training for the workers, employee. It's interesting because the KIT actually has a huge problem in the application of young people, of young personnel, and these are the ideals of working environments of young people, of the young generations. They are asking also for the meanings of their work, and they have this huge expectation of jobs which are inspiring, motivating, and where they are able to create aspects of their personality. So appreciation of labor work versus labor as a good, which I think is still going on, of course, and I think there are also fields of tensions. And the shift, what we are actually analyzing with big data and with artificial intelligence, we have a strong shift to quantitative measures at work, which lead to new forms of organization of work, mobile work, agile work, experimental work. We need experiments. We need really to figure out how we can create new organizations. There are a lot of wonderful examples, and I think it would be useful and worthy to think about and to discuss them intensively. So Tayloristic work, Tayloristic organization, or Tayloristic control versus dignity of workers and employers. So, and I would like to end this with a quotation. Maybe it sums up a little bit what was my idea for this talk. So the ethical guidance seems to be necessary in order to be able to decide and to choose among technological-based possibilities, the ones that further human and ecological flourishing and to build a human and sustainable future. The future of work must be ethical. It can no longer be managed only technologically. So, thank you very much.
So really sorry about this disturbing, but this is the trade-off. Actually, we are in a public place, and there are some people who are discussing. So this is the one of the new feature of work. Thank you, Bettina. Work labs, yes. Work labs. Any questions? We have time for questions. I liked very much the 8 categories of actions which are necessary to shape the visions of work for future, because I found also yesterday I asked about citizens' visions, where is the place of them? And when I take a look at your steps, actually, when we come to conflicts of values, now I have the answer to my question exactly at that place. Maybe we can add the visions of citizens and compare them with visions of experts. What do you think about it? Where could we also have this added value of empowerment of citizens?
With regard to work, Mashid?
Yes, future of work, because actually these visions are for them.
Okay. Yes, also I remember there was in Germany, there was a very huge, it was called also democratic process, organized by the ministry, by the unions. It was a huge societal process with regard to future of work. And of course, citizenship and the idea of connectedness, work and daily life and work-life balance and sustainability became a very, very important factor in all this. You saw that this separation between life and work, it always was very difficult from theoretical point of view. So I know very well the feminist theory already in the 1970s. They already criticized this separation and the division between labor and daily life. But today I think it's visible. Because although from the changes of roles, and I think together with the citizens to think about future of work is very, very important, because we do not only speak about labor, we speak about work in a very amplifying sense. So we have such a huge variety of works and of work, which is extremely important also for the development of societies.
So Bettina, thank you for the presentation and your complex picture you painted about challenges. I have a question. In my perspective, it's not the first campaign for artificial intelligence. When I started at ITAS 15 years ago or 20 years ago, 2005, there was also something like a campaign. We need this, we are prepared, we develop. And first I have a remark, and then I have a question. My remark is that I have the impression that we are often in the same complex dilemma, because we have these forces of economics, yes, companies and concentration of capital forces industry to restructure in a global context and not in a local one, with local pitfalls. Yeah? dramatic situations, for example, also in former hotspots of development. And I have the question, if you remember these cycles and loops we have in discussion, is there a difference in the current discussion? You gave one hint in your answer to Mashit. You said it's visible. Some more restructurings are better visible than before, I understood. Is there also on the side of the promoters of artificial intelligence also an optimized strategy, or is it still the same old wine in new in neuen Schläuchen? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I should say that in the promoters of artificial intelligence, they are using the same narrative since decades. So it's more efficiency, it substitutes human force, and I'm really astonished because in my perspective, it sounds very naive. And I think, but shouldn't we have overtaken this discourse? I can't believe it, really. And but they are still going on, and I think we have to position. But on the other side, there are these discourses on artificial intelligence and ethics. And you are right. This discourse exists since, I would say, centuries. Yeah, there is a long historic approach on that. But in the combination with work, I think there are some new ideas which came in, and where I would say the impact of these ideas, because of the external factors, pandemic crisis, where, for instance, mobile work becomes very strong and people really don't like to go back to this old structure. So there is something what we call rupture, or it's something opens that the climate change problem. We have a lot of problems, and of course there are risks, but I think because there is this, we are in this situation, there are also options. And I think we should really see our options in this. But of course, I am also very critical if I think the reconfiguration of our economy, for instance, in the automotive sector or in other sectors, this seems really a huge project and nearly impossible. But on the other side, I know a lot of young organizations, firms, they really have changed. And I would say, and this was also a proposal, I think we don't know very well about these organizations which have strengthened their objectives on sustainable goals, and it is possible. And this is what me makes really, what I think it gives me a more optimistic ideas, that I think it is possible if there is really the will to do it and to go forward and to change. And I think this is also the ethical part on that, because in my seminaries at university, so we are teaching a lot, or we are speaking a lot about, you have to confront, you have to go into a position and not to think, oh yeah, it goes forward, we cannot do anything. I think we have really to think about, to confront ourselves, and in this context we are to really to go forward and to go into a very clear position, maybe a critical position.
Thank you very much, Bettina. So, yes, we have a question, maybe a short question. Very short, but important. Yes.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. We already talked about a lot of things yesterday about this conflict and consensus and how conflict can be resolved. But when I want to engage more with this question in terms of if there are very fundamental onto epistemological differences on what is valuable. Then how to resolve conflicts, or shall we see conflicts or sites where conflicts arise as productive sites rather than just sites that are disturbing and failures and yeah.
I think this is very interesting. And we talked about yesterday, and I thought a lot about this. So I think we should really avoid polarization. So as we had it in the 1980s, capitalistic versus anti-capitalistic attitude. So this does not help any way. So there are a lot of, we have to open this. We have to think about a lot of facets which we are, so there's a huge literature, of course, about the capitalistic varieties of capitalistic systems. But I think we have to think in plural models. There's no single model. And of course, I think we have to also to handle these conflicts, as you said yesterday, not in a polarized way, but in, let's say, so what is possible, what is not possible to figure out, but also to go into processes. This is clear. We cannot let this thing going on, but we have to go actively in processes. And our colleague from the unions, I think for me, he's really a model. He's really avoiding this always to intensification the conflicts and to focus on conflicts. So he's always focusing on what is possible and how we come together and little steps to go further. And I think this would be very, very important to figure out what is possible and to go forward. And I think I'm very much convinced that this one model fits all does not work. We need a lot of models, local models, but also economic models. And we see it also now in this Energiewende in Germany, where we have to old structures to think about in a new way, decentralized ways, local ways, national, and so on. And this is difficult, of course, because it's complicated. But I think it's the same for the working models. So there are a lot of expectations, and there are a lot of models which we can, I think, we should think about.
Thank you very much. I think that we come back to the coffee break to you with very interesting continuing this discussion. Thank you very much, Bettina. So may I ask our second speaker, Marco Baumgartner, to talk about human AI interaction, comprehensive analysis of competence requirements on firm level. So,
thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. My name is Marco Baumgartner. I come from the Hochschule Karlsruhe, University of Applied Science, and work for the Institute for Learning and Innovation in Networks. And together with my colleagues from Fraunhofer EASY, which is George Horvath, Heidi Heimberger, Christian Lörch, and Steffen Kinkel, who's also from the Hochschule Karlsruhe, we currently work in the research project CARL. CARL, Bettina is also involved, and I think Antonio as well, explores artificial intelligence in the context of work and learning, especially in the region of Karlsruhe, and it will become a contact point if there are any questions regarding artificial intelligence. Within CARL, we've got 5 research fields. One of those research fields is the ethical debate, where Bettina and Antonio are involved. I'm in the research field regarding competences and qualifications in the context of artificial intelligence, and therefore wanted to present some first results we got so far in this research area. So let me give you a short introduction into the topic. Currently, artificial intelligence is a very influencing emerging technology and is also said to hold great potential for companies. There's a big hype currently that lots of decision makers in companies are confronted with. Should I invest in this kind of technology, and maybe often take wrong decisions, maybe they invest in wrong projects. So as shown in the actual numbers, companies are still quite hesitant when it comes to AI adoption. It's only about 1/5 of company who already introduced those kind of technologies, depending on different surveys. And last year we made a survey looking for possibilities and barriers why companies are still quite hesitant. And one of the main points was missing digital skills, which is a major obstacle for AI adoption. And similar results come from the Enquete Commission on Artificial Intelligence of the German Bundestag, who mentioned, and it's very relevant to anchor AI competences in the curricula and education programs. So that's why we wanted to focus on competences and requirements out of a company perspective. And we looked on the current focus of research on digital skills in the context of artificial intelligence, especially in Germany. And we saw that most of the research is on qualifications which are required for actually developing artificial intelligence. So more technical perspective. Then there is a research on working with artificial intelligence, but not really the introduction process, so which competences are required in the introduction process. And there's research on a personal, individual level, so what do I personally need, but not as much on a company level. So that's the focus of our work. So I reread the title of our work: Human-AI Interaction, a comprehensive analysis of competence requirements at firm level. And I'll explain some of the keywords I mentioned in the title. So first, let us have a look on human-AI interaction. Within our group, we use a relatively simple, non-technical definition of human-AI interaction, meaning the completion of a user's task with the help of AI support. So that means that we mostly concentrate on use cases in which humans are actually involved. We don't want to concentrate on only automated processes where the human doesn't play a role anymore. We want to concentrate on AI adoption which supports employees and rather than replace them. The next keyword I want to highlight are competences. We define those as abilities that can be developed through experiences to be able to act adequately in complex situations in a self-organized way. So we want to concentrate on competences rather than on qualifications. Qualifications are very easy not very easy, but they are more easier to identify, as those are certified and verifiable. Competences are very difficult to identify, as it is more than just, for example, as a degree of a university or some other degrees. Yeah. So, and the third level are the requirements on firm level for introducing, implementing, and working with AI technologies. So we don't want to concentrate only on the work with artificial intelligence, but also on the decision-making process. Because if companies take wrong decisions to go into artificial intelligence projects, they often fail, and or maybe the employees aren't involved in the process, or because they don't have the competences which are required to lead such a project. So we want to go on a macro level in a company and not only on the micro level of an individual or personal. So I'll give you a short introduction to our method. At first we did a literature review on competences in the context of artificial intelligence to see what we can find in research, what is already researched. And then the next step, we wanted to talk to companies about the current status and also on AI training providers. So we had quite mixed sample for our explorative qualitative interviews. We had 10 respondents from 9 companies, and 4 of those were technology enablers who are currently developing artificial intelligence technologies. We talked to AI training providers, and we talked to application partners. Those were companies who want to introduce artificial intelligence within our research project. And the next step, we plan for September 2022, a quantitative online survey to go in a mixed method approach to see how our explorative results are in the quantity. So we identified different clusters for artificial intelligence related competences, and as mentioned earlier before, there are different phases in the introduction process. So we mostly have at first the process of generating ideas, of conception phase, of decision making, which we put a strong focus on, and we later on have the competences for implementation and application of artificial intelligence. We found out in our interviews that there are very different persons involved in those 2 phases, and there are some, or it can be criticized because, especially if we talk to the technology enabling companies, so the developing companies, external service providers, they wish to involve the end users of the artificial intelligence in very early phases, but they are usually confronted only with decision makers who they are mostly non-technical and don't really know the processes within the companies. They are mostly managers which are involved in early phases, but there's a strong wish also from technology enablers to involve the end users in earlier phases. So those are the 2 phases, and we then further splitted the competences in 3 different types of competences. Meaning the general competences which are required in the project team, and later on the general competences required of end users. Then we have AI-specific competences which are mainly the focus of artificial intelligence, what you need maybe of a technical perspective, but also of a decision maker perspective about knowledge about AI. And we have a 3rd category which we named mediation and moderation competences. Mediation and moderation competences is the link between different parties in companies. So as we also discussed in other presentations, there's often conflicts between different parties, maybe between non-technical or technical representatives, but also hierarchical, so between supervisors and employees. So we need those, we call those boundary spanners, to mediate and to moderate and to talk with each perspective. And those need a very interdisciplinary view on things. We didn't focus that much on technical development within companies, as our interviews showed that they mostly use external service providers which help the companies to develop, at least at the current phase of AI adoption. So it's mostly an external development and not an in-house development. We wanted to concentrate on those companies' requirements to roll out such an artificial intelligence project within a company with the help of external service providers. Now we have those different clusters which we identified in advance to our interviews, and we wanted to fill those out with company requirements, and now it's very much, so I won't go into too much details, but on the left side you can see those 3 different type of competences, and on the top you can see the 2 phases. The 2 phases are the competences for generating ideas, conception, decision making, and the competences for implementation and application. So, for example, on general competences, those competences seem kind of general, generalizable on different other digitization projects, like, for example, the ability to focus and structure meetings, for example, to avoid over-engineering, or the ability to identify and solve problems. But they are, however, very important for artificial intelligence projects, as usually AI projects are very, they address very specific problems within companies. It's not just about digitizing my whole production or the whole process. It's usually I have a specific problem within my company and I want to solve it. So it's very, those kind of competencies are very important to stay focused and to address this problem and not go everywhere else and get distracted. So those are the general competences, and within the AI specific competences, it's mostly about to make the right decision within my company. I mean, it's debatable what's the right decision, but don't to have it's important to get a basic understanding for decision makers, but also for IT technicians about artificial intelligence, and develop a feeling what is possible, where can I introduce artificial intelligence, and where can't I introduce artificial intelligence, because many projects fail if you just start without any idea. So the last segment are the mediation moderation competences. As mentioned earlier, we see this one as a link between the different parties, as boundary spanners, as they make a bridge for different parties to communicate. And there's mostly about interdisciplinary mindset, about to be able to empathize with others, and to communicate between the different parties. I want to give you now some further insights into the qualitative interviews regarding selected challenges we found out. The first phase was rather deductively, so we had those categories and filled those categories with competences. And in this way, we proceeded in an inductively way, where we just wanted to know what challenges companies are faced in the context of artificial intelligence, with a strong focus on competences. So the first point is, and we discussed it earlier, Majid, the acceptance of employees, but acceptance, Majid told me a new or term for this, what I actually mean. It's the acceptability, what I actually mean. It's very important to create the process in an acceptable way for the employees. We sometimes speak about trustworthiness. So how can I create the system in a trustworthy way? And on the right side, I always put a quote for each of the points. This is now a quote of one of the surveyed AI training providers, who mentions that they realized that acceptance is an essential point, so that employees are involved in the process, but it's very difficult to teach this kind of competence, as usually acceptance is the result of other processes, like participation of employees, like transparency when I communicate with my employees. So yes, and that's very difficult to put in training programs or whatever. This first point is the first challenge we realized. The second point is the availability of skilled workers and decision makers. It's what I mentioned earlier. There's often the problem that companies don't know anything about artificial intelligence yet, and then there's this big hype which they are currently confronted with, and everybody thinks, oh, we need to adopt artificial intelligence now as quick as possible, otherwise we won't have any chances on the market or whatever. So, and this can lead to problems, and it's very important also for decision makers to get to know what an AI system is, what I personally can do with artificial intelligence. And this is leading to my next point, the expectations of AI technologies. Because with the current hype, everybody thinks, okay, this technology will help us for everything. But it's often the case that decision makers overestimate the technology, and they are disappointed at the end when they introduce artificial intelligence, as shown by this. Also, that was one of the AI training providers, that through the hype they are somehow overloaded with information about AI, and yes, the expectations about how important AI will be are often too high, and they should rather take a sober look at the technology, get to know it, and especially break it down for their own situation in the company. Yes, and on the other side, expectations of AI technologies, of course, of the end users, they're often wrong calibrated. Because of media and whatever, where employees hear about AI technologies, they often expect it to, yes, they might overestimate the possibilities at the moment of artificial intelligence, because at least at the moment they are not that strong as they as it often, and they not just stand there and functioning. It's a very, very tough process to teach artificial intelligence those processes, which are very easy for human beings. So there's sometimes a gap between the expectations and the actual possibilities with which AI technologies have at the moment. My next point are legal issues. Legal issues. We heard of our interviewees that it's usually companies are quite sensitive when it comes to legal issues, but they have a lot of concerns, but they usually don't have the competences to address those legal issues. So as shown by this AI technology providers, there are many company representatives who have concerns, but concerns are not the same as competences. So there might be still be a lack of those legal issues regarding artificial intelligence. And the fifth point are ethical issues. Ethical issues are currently. I mean, we spoke to one managing director of a company that wants to introduce artificial intelligence. They haven't introduced it earlier, so they are very, very new on the topic. And he told us that it is very difficult for companies to know where the way is going, because it's not defined at the beginning what they want to do. They explore it. And therefore, it is very difficult for those kind of companies who test it to address ethical issues from the beginning, as they don't want to know where to go. And this is a problem for companies at the moment. And, as the quote shows, he mentioned that it is very important to address ethics, and he sees human resource to get involved in those kind of in the ethical debate about artificial intelligence. So those were the challenges those are some selected challenges we identified within our interviews. And I want to give you a short outlook what our next steps are. As mentioned earlier, we want to do a quantitative online survey. Now we already have this whole list, but we don't know how important they actually are, and if there are lacks of those competences, maybe because of the digitization projects they made before, all those competences are in the company. So we wanted to have a look on the right side, competence assessment on the first, get quantitative data on the perceived importance, but also on the demand and availability of those competences. And what was also important in our opinion, is that we have a context. What are the persons which are involved in this process? What use case and purposes those companies have, and interesting for us as well as if they make an in-house development on their own, or if they get external AI development providers. So as planned results, we want to do a practical analysis tool for the identification of competence needs in companies. So companies get the chance to analyze their own structures, if there are competency requirements, and yes, and we want to make first concepts for AI-oriented teaching and learning methods. And last but not least, we want to get scientific and empirical findings on AI-related changes on competency structures in companies. So that's it for now. I thank you very much for your attention. If you want to, yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this very interesting and very structured presentation of your research. I'm sure that there are some questions.
Thank you. Well, it was, of course, very interesting because this analysis on competences touches the central issue related with the implementation of artificial intelligence at the company level. And that's why I find it very, very important because, well, you make this focused on the region of Karlsruhe, could be also in other regions with problems of implementation of artificial intelligence or existing or not specific competencies, but also in other countries as well, could be interesting this way. I have well, I can make a statement of interest because of my questions. Well, I'm a social scientist, a sociologist, for more than 40 years, and that's why I will focus in these type of questions. First of the one at I think the last, no, the slide number 8, but at the end, yeah, there. It's typical and usual that you make an analysis and the analysis of different results, and you raise some aspects as legal issues. No, but well, we could say, well, it's important that there are or not legal issues related with competencies at the company level. Well, okay, there are consultants, and on ethical. You can raise and interesting, but social issues, they never come up. And they are, from my point of view, that's why we can discuss, for me, are the center of these. If you go to the slide number 7, which is not the last one, here, it's very interesting, this one, and perhaps one should get more attention on it for the further stages, because you mentioned some problems that are not yet solved, and I think this is very interesting because it, from my point of view, again, should not be seen as, you can you have at the left side the type of competencies, okay, but from the right side you have some sort of, you name it, phase 1, phase 2, or types of competencies, so to say. Then the first group is competencies for decision making, conception, or and the phase 2, or the right one, is on implementation. And here is the problem, because if you go to the companies, especially small-sized companies, but can be larger companies, and you look at these companies from the social point of view, analyzing them as with social structures. This means not only hierarchical levels, different ones, but also occupations with traditions, age groups, and of course competencies, because you define from the beginning, don't forget that competencies are related with knowledge, but also with experience. And that's why I'm talking about age groups. Then, whenever more experience you have, you are older, but probably if you are older, you have less scholarization process within this AI. And here, again, if we go to the topic that was presented by Bettina, the basic response, so to say, to these challenges that AI introduces are related with organization models or visions, so if we can say in this way. And there, most competencies, as you put in the left column, as decision-making or conception, they should also be at the level of implementation. This means that a machine operator should have, in a certain type of visions, the capacity for or competence on interdisciplinary mindset, for example, because he or she should know how to program, to control, to make quality analysis of the process, maintenance, preventive maintenance, whatsoever. And honesty and authenticity, it was interesting, should be especially in the mindset of managers, top managers, because usually they are neither honest, neither authentic. And this is very interesting, because if you look on that as a matricial way, then you can find blocks of these competencies distributed in a more diverse way and not in these two columns. We can talk about this possibility in another occasion, but this means that one needs this kind of sociological view from my perspective. I can be wrong, all the others are or philosophers or economists or engineers, then okay, this is a sociologist, it says their own things. But it's my perspective on this, and I find it very interesting, and congratulate you. Thank you.
Thank you. A very interesting comment, especially this socio-technical aspects and social and thinking about it as a matrix. Do you have a comment on that? Would it be?
Yes, maybe a short comment. I totally agree with your comment, and thank you very much for those valuable insights. The two phases were related to where it occurred in the interviews. So I totally agree that they should be maybe in both phases, and there are more phases as well. In our intention when we made those two phases was to show that it's not just one process, but it's separated in different phases, and also to get critical aspects on, for example, if we found out that currently most end users are involved only in this phase 2, but this is too late, so they should get involved in phase 1, and it's more or less only a picture of the current status, and should not be should not be seen as yes, as suggestion of our side. Yeah, but I totally agree, and it's very interesting. And to the social issues, we try to address those, for example, through this mediation and moderation perspective. I mean, it's maybe not exactly the same, but we try to get these social issues addressed as well. So, but yeah, I'll be glad to discuss about it later.
Thank you very much. I also found that this category, mediation and moderation, very nice. If we could consider it as a TA's perspective, it's exactly something that we are calling for shaping technologies. And thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. So now may I ask Antonio Moniz to start the third presentation, Interaction of Artificial Intelligence with Human Work. So it brings again the discussion to interaction between technology and human. TA issues around Industry 4.0. I just put it here.
Yeah, this my presentation is based on the work that with my team in Portugal we have been developing about AI and work, and especially on some cases mostly from industry, from manufacturing industry and automobile sector, but mostly there. That's why we are focusing on issues related with technology assessment, but in this framework of implementation of Industry 4.0. That's why it's quite closely connected with previous presentations. Yeah. Well, what I want is just to focus on some aspects that we found very determinant on Industry 4.0, and then focus on the issue of human-machine interaction inside these contexts, and then what is TA coming from these analyses on human-machine interaction, and then we can talk about alternatives and options. Here, in terms of introduction, I will not take too much time, but what it is interesting is the differences from the processes that came from the Industrial Revolution are related with a complete different type of interaction between humans and machines. Yeah, from the beginning there was a more manual contact or direct contact, and today is mediated through ICT systems, information technologies. And on these processes we can have some, well, what we could say, some techno-optimists that talk about the second machine age, where even they say that the artificial intelligence systems on the work level are even replacing capacities from humans, especially on cognitive level, not only mechanic ones. But for others, for example, it's just a prolongation of the process that we were knowing from the Industrial Revolution as a historical process. But what we have clearly now is in the manufacturing industry we have a more globalized processes. That's why we can talk, as Bettina talked about, networking at a global level, platformization of processes, but overall mainly also affecting small-sized companies. The complexity is becoming higher, and The typical technologies that we are discussing on the context of Industry 4.0, this was also some sort of question that I wanted to make is, for some, they think, well, this artificial intelligence is something very general, very complicated, we don't know how to implement, but the basic or the typical technologies are related with robotics, numerical control systems, because they require this programming of processes, and this in most industrialized countries is quite well spread. Just the Industry 4.0 means a different type of automation processes, and this means a step forward, but it's not something that is impossible to reach. Anyway, on this Industry 4.0, we have still problems that are not solved, although from one decade that there are processes in many different countries, but the implementation and its impact, it's not yet very clear. What happens at the local level, at the company level, at the sectoral level, at the national level, there are many different studies, and we don't have a clear evidence of these impacts. Anyway, what is interesting, although there are not so many studies on that, is the impact at the regional level, because it seems that companies with higher industrial experience are those that, as a trend, are more able to integrate this kind of new concepts on production. For example, the case of Karlsruhe can be one example compared with other regions. Anyhow, there are many national initiatives on Industry 4.0. This means that it started from Germany for some reasons, but then almost overall Europe, there are national programs. But what I can say about this is that it is interesting, the last 10 years, the last decade, this means a huge investment for the modernization of the industry infrastructure in all of these countries. Of course, the purpose was the reshoring of main critical activities that in the previous decades was the example of the development of capitalistic economies was to outshore the activities to labor with low cost in China, for example, but also Eastern Europe countries. And then the conclusion that was reached that these countries were with very capacities, increased capacity to manage these type of technologies, but in the mainland, so to say, well, Germany, but in general the Western countries, there were problems of related with transport, of logistics that made these very critical, and still today we are facing these kind of issues. But what is interesting is that the questions that we can raise about these policies on Industry 4.0 is that they raise new issues related with organizational changes. I talked just now on logistics, but also internally from the companies. As we just heard about the competencies, the need for implementing new management policies internally and new strategies towards training and organizational models are raising up very quickly all over the sectors. But also here, what I mentioned, that are emerging competencies, new competencies that didn't exist before, and skill needs that are related with these, not only technologies, but also the organizational models. No? And this, yeah, I don't know if I have time to talk about that, but because it's not the scope of my intervention, but on the impacts, we can have on the theoretical discussion, debate, what we have seen on the literature review as that there, although the automation is increasing in all manufacturing industries, there are many non-automatable tasks in these companies. But some jobs are not so vulnerable. What are the vulnerable jobs that can be pushed towards unemployment are those that uses simple tasks, repetitive tasks, and these can be quickly replaced by machinery. Then the other aspect is that within the same occupation, the automation potential of these tasks have a large variation from job to job. It's not, you can say, a mechanical operator can be threatened by the increased automation, but this is not true if we look at the micro level. It can happen in one company, yes, can be unemployed, but in the other company, not. Then this trend in terms of professions is very difficult to be generalized. It's more focused on the qualifications, and even in some policies that are being developed in different countries. Some authors, for example, raise the issue of increasing complementarity of machines and humans, and not necessarily just the substitution of humans by machines. Then this also raises the questions of qualifications and competence and so forth. The other is that this interaction and differences also lead to different types of impacts on labor. There is not a single process of impact driven through technology. The institutional framework that in each society can be provided for these processes is as well important. In some countries also in these policies, they are more aware of possibilities for experiments at the organizational level, or providing further programs for training, vocational training, with some specificities, and this provides an institutional framework that can help to mitigate the negative technological impacts. And then also it is related with the labor relation systems in different countries, with the existence of innovation institutions, and that we have a whole sort of institutions that play a very important role on the intensification of negative impacts, or on the mitigation of those impacts. Well, we can say that this interaction anyway leads to new models of work, because it can either imply fragmentation of tasks, the instruments for working become also different, or there are also different types of potential possible combinations of human work and technical action. Also, what I've said before, this interdependency can all lead for new forms of cooperation between humans and machines and technology. And then it can be a supplement of human work, or can substitute. But this depends not on the technology, but on the organizational model that where there was an option. And here I'm getting close to the TA issues. In spite of this, the majority of the literature, when you read articles published on human-machine interaction, the large majority focus on just issues related with safety and complexity of work environments, but mostly on safety as an ergonomic issue. Then some authors talked about the two effects of digitalization. One is the substitution, the other complementarity. But anyhow, and in a certain way, Bettina also talked about this, what we acknowledge is the massive growth of digitalized information and the improved performance on data processing, big data especially. And this can lead to a certain extent to a standardization of work processes. And this can be a problem on this increased automation. And why it is a TA topic, this human-machine interaction. From one side, we can see that there are much information that leads, especially in magazines, not in scientific literature so much, but more in other type of media, that call the attention for the probability of reduction of millions of workplaces, but qualitative research to try to verify these are almost missing. There are not so much studies. But from our point of view, this technology needs a TA approach to understand how far this introduction of artificial intelligence at the firm level can be identified by, for example, innovation experts and technology managers. And we don't still know how far this has been done. Anyway, the possibilities, as we were seeing, of increasing industrial democracy, this means participation, that you also talked about on this, the participation of workers in the decision process, can be one of the ways, one of the options to make this introduction and impact more balanced and mitigate its negative aspects. Then I would say one of the positive responses would be this involvement. But of course there are the trends, possibilities for these disruptive effects. Here on the shift of perspective that we can have on this is related to the fact that the increase of automation is not very simple. No, it's more costly and not all tasks are able to be automated simply. For example, we can define that at the work at the operator levels, the strengths lay on the level of cognition that a human can have in relation to the work process. The capacity for reaction, artificial intelligence is very limited still on this level. adaptation to quick changes, and improvisation, which is very important. It is related also with the competencies. Robots still have limitations on the low cognitive capacity. I would say, in general, artificial intelligence, when we talk about this, there are still experiments, but some authors, roboticists, they say that robotics is still in the infancy level and not so advanced as many think. There is almost no autonomous adaptation. You don't see robots playing around and doing tasks at the shop floor. This is not the case. And the working envelope is very limited. When we talk about cobots, for example, as the only possibility that now exists to a robot to work side by side with a human without a fence, are very special robots. They have a very low duty, as we say. Then they cannot pick up heavy components or parts, and then that's why they can be side to side with humans in order not to have injuries if there is a problem, because it can have. And then from these ideas we can have different options. Then one is related with the assessments of technical progress in different sectors to understand how far it is different from one to other sector, and this can be very important to define policy making. The other one is that for some, for example, in this survey in 2015, one conclusion is that this automation could enhance human work, but yeah, this is one hypothesis, but it's not the only outcome. And there are different roles of interaction with machines that lead to different alternatives. Then one that is aspect that is being recently more focused also in terms of research at the European level is this concept of 5.0. It's not a new phase of automation. Sometimes we like to label something 5.0 because it's new. This means to include the human dimension, the human centeredness on the development of technology, especially technologies related with Industry 4.0. That's why they call this. And this means it should be like Industry 4.0 plus the social dimension included there. But as I said, that although the discussion in general is not recent, this idea is being supported strongly, at least at the European level, but also in the United States, they are also coming into this debate. Then this is the definition of Industry 4.0, and here again, as I talked before, the decision-making processes as the control on technical systems should be more shared between humans and machines and not being laid on the artificial intelligence side to be more developed and not to be complementary with humans. Then this all makes all sort of options, social political options for different sectors, and of course, but I don't repeat what I have said before on the comment on macro intervention, is the need for studying these competencies. And we can raise several questions. I will not give the answers, of course, but is, for example, what are the implications of artificial intelligence on in work and industrial relation systems and employment? If this concept of 4.0 have which type of implications for human work, what are the visions on the role of humans on these systems, and not just visions on technology, and to try to find what happens in terms of humans. Which expectations on technologies can strengthen the concept of work involving humans, of course. New forms of human interaction with artificial intelligence can be developed from this side. Which regulation and ethical principles can be considered, and what are responsible innovation principles automated related with automated work, and this can be important. And because of that, which is the role of unions, for example, or workers' councils on this implementation strategy. And yeah, that's it. Then I put some references. We can have at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation, bringing the points together from perspective of Industry 4.0. Are there questions at the moment? Could you maybe again come to this Industry 5.0? Is it a much more participatory aspect?
Yep. Of course, it's the basic for this concept. Participatory in the sense that it should be the development of technologies should be human-centered. This means you should have to consider what are the human needs first to be considered for the technology development. This means that when we talk about a robot or a numerical control machine tool, it seems for social scientists or non-engineers of this area that, well, a robot is a robot and a machine tool is a machine tool, and that's it. And it is not, because we have, and since I'm talking not from today, but from the 90s mostly, or 80s, there were already types of machines, ways of programming, that had behind a model of organization, work organization, or labor division even. Just to give a small example, especially with the numerical machine tools, this means a numerical control machine tools is a computer attached to a machine tool, milling machine or turning machine, but that would control all the steps of machining. And especially the Swiss, for example, they were quite good to develop some, or Germans. And they have done the way of programming and introducing steps of programming very complicated. Then the interface with the human was very simple. The conclusion would be that when it is in the shop floor, then the operator should have some information about the status of machining, and when it should stop the process, or if there is an emergency. Of course, there is always this red big button that must touch. And many other machine tool manufacturers, especially from Korea and from Japan, they developed processes that enable the operators to introduce programs, or especially to enable the what we say fine-tuning of these machines, the preparation of these machines. And it was very interesting that in Portugal, when I made my PhD, 30 years ago, it was with these cases, and then we could find in the same factory, small-sized manufacturing factory, these two types of machines, and then the relation of humans with these machines were completely different. No? One was just to have what was important. If there is a problem, just a button, then we say operators as button pushers, then do nothing more. Then if there is a problem, call the engineer and then he will come. The others is, no, the operator can intervene in the system and should learn the basics on that. This is the same for robotics and robotic programming. And then there are different alternatives, even on the design of these machines nowadays. And what we can say is it is possible to develop machines according to these organizational principles. A robot is a robot, okay, but not all robots work in the same way. Some need further intervention of humans, the others not. This is general.
Thank you very much. Haben wir Fragen in online? Okay, du kannst das letzte Frage dann Pause auf.
Okay, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. Would you say, you mentioned collaborative robots earlier, would you say this kind of hand-guiding programming thing can help you in this way that the end users, the users are able to program it without any programming skills on their own?
Yeah, of course. This has been known not recently. It's quite old now. We could have the first programming systems was to use the arms of the robots to do more or less in the same way as humans, you know, for example, for welding or to assembly. And then with these, you could program automatically just with these movements. And today is more sophisticated. You can have a hand glove and then to do that more efficiently, so to say. The issue is in a factory, who do you call to do this kind of initial movements? And then you have the options. Usually, in most companies, they call a technician or engineer to do that, and then the operators have already the machine programmed. Or you use the operator to do that. Then I have seen and analyzed both cases. Even in Portugal, also at that time, a company wanted for welding, agricultural, this equipment. It is quite complicated in terms of design and welding systems. And they understood that to increase the production level, they should need to invest in robotics, welding robotics that are the most complicated for programming. And they didn't know how to do that. They didn't have engineers on board. And then, of course, many technology providers, they wanted to sell their own things. And the manager was quite clever and used the older expert on welding, worker, to come with them to decide which type of robots. And then the robots should do the same type of movements, difficult movements as an operator, but then it should be the operator to explain how the robot should work. And this is a vision on how to use humans as in the participation of the design of technology and not the other way around. This is very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to add a comment or? No. Okay. So I would say thank you very much for participation and all of our. And we have some minutes for coffee break and we will try to continue. Vielen Dank.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
myself. I am Santiago Campos from Spain. Hola.